40 world-class experts stood speechless in a luxury hall, while a furious billionaire prepared to walk away from everything. Then a waitress, someone no one had noticed, spoke a single sentence in ancient Mandarin. The room froze. What she revealed would expose pride, rewrite history, and force a powerful man to listen for the first time in his life. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. Hit subscribe button because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Victor Liang hated wasted time. Time was money. Time was leverage. Time was proof that he still mattered. From the panoramic windows of the Jade Crown International Hotel, the city stretched endlessly beneath him. Steel, glass, ambition. 40 experts sat before him in tailored suits, degrees heavier than their confidence. Economists, linguists, historians, cultural analysts flown in from 3 continents. And not one of them had an answer. Victor's jaw tightened. Again, he said coldly. Explain it to me like I didn't already pay you. Silence followed. A consultant cleared his throat. The inscription predates modern Mandarin. It's symbolic. Victor slammed his palm on the table. I didn't build a $40 billion empire on symbolism, he snapped. I built it on solutions. The room shrank under his voice. This was not just a puzzle. It was a public humiliation. An ancient text tied to a historic acquisition, one that investors were watching closely. Failure here meant ridicule, loss of face. And Victor Liang did not lose face. Across the room, Mei Lin stood near the service station, holding a silver tray. She had learned to move quietly. Her posture was perfect. Her eyes lowered. Years in hospitality had trained her body to disappear while being useful. Guests rarely noticed her unless something went wrong. She had overheard everything. The frustration, the arrogance, the fear behind it. The ancient characters displayed on the large screen twisted something deep inside her chest. Not because she didn't recognize them, but because she did. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Some words are not meant to be translated. They are meant to be understood. Mei Lin tightened her grip on the tray. She was a waitress. This was not her place. Victor paced now, jacket off, tie loosened. 40 of you, he said, gesturing sharply. And you're telling me no one here can read this? A professor spoke cautiously. It's written in classical Mandarin, but archaic. Extremely rare. Victor laughed once, short and bitter. Then why are you here? No one answered. The silence roared. Mei Lin felt her pulse quicken. She knew what those words meant. They weren't a warning. They were a confession. Her heart pounded as if it were trying to stop her. Don't speak. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't forget your place. She stepped back. Then forward again. Victor turned sharply. This meeting is adjourned. That was when a soft voice broke through the tension. May I say something? Every head turned. Victor stared at the waitress standing near the wall, tray lowered, hands steady despite the tremor in her breath. This is highly inappropriate, an assistant whispered. Victor's eyes narrowed. You understand what we're discussing? Mei Lin met his gaze. Yes, she said. The room stilled. She swallowed and spoke again. In ancient Mandarin. Fluent. Precise. Alive. The sound sliced through the room like a blade. Victor froze. So did the experts. Because she hadn't translated the text. She had answered in that moment, Victor Liang realized something terrifying. The truth he was desperate to control had never belonged to him. If this moment surprised you, hit like, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe, because what happens next will change everything. The room did not breathe. 40 experts, men and women who had testified before governments, advised royal families, written books that redefined history, sat frozen as the last syllable left the waitress's lips. Ancient Mandarin. Not rehearsed, not memorized, lived. Victor Liang felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. What did you just say? He asked slowly. Mei Lin's heart thundered in her ears. She had crossed the line. There was no retreat now. Her tray trembled slightly, but her voice did not. I answered the inscription, she said quietly. It is not a question. It is a confession. A murmur rippled through the room. One of the linguists stood abruptly. That's impossible. Classical Mandarin of that era doesn't. She turned toward him, her gaze respectful but unyielding. It does, she said. Then she repeated the passage, line by line, her pronunciation flawless, cadence reverent. The characters are written in mourning syntax. The author wasn't warning successors. He was apologizing to them. Victor's breath caught. Apologizing for what? He asked. For pride, Mei Lin replied. Silence struck again, heavier this time. She gestured gently toward the screen. The phrase you're translating as eternal authority actually means borrowed power. And the final line, she hesitated, then spoke it again softer, means when the unheard speak, the mighty must listen. A chair scraped the floor. One of the senior historians whispered, that interpretation hasn't existed in any modern text. Mei Lin nodded. Because it was passed orally. In families. Not institutions. Victor stared at her as though the room had tilted. You expect me to believe, he said, voice tight, that a waitress knows something 40 specialists don't? Mei Lin swallowed. I expect you to believe the words, she said. Not the uniform. The air crackled. Victor felt anger surge, sharp, instinctive. His authority was being challenged in front of everyone. Investors. Advisors. People who measured his worth in dominance. Yet beneath the anger was something else. Fear. Because she was right. He looked back at the inscription, and for the first time, the words no longer looked like an asset. They looked like a mirror. Who taught you this? He demanded. My grandmother, Mei Lin replied. She was a translator. During the Cultural Revolution, she wasn't allowed to write. So she taught me to listen. The room shifted. Victor's voice dropped. Why didn't you speak sooner? Her answer came without accusation. Because people who serve are taught that speaking costs us our jobs. That landed harder than any insult. One of the consultants scoffed nervously. This is highly unprofessional. We're basing billion-dollar decisions on. Enough. Victor's voice cut through him. Everyone turned. Victor stood motionless, eyes still on Mei Lin. Repeat the final line, he said. She did. This time, the words struck him differently. Borrowed power, unheard voices, listening. His chest tightened. This acquisition, this legacy project, was meant to immortalize him. His name etched beside history. Yet the very text anchoring it was condemning the arrogance he lived by. And she, the woman he hadn't even noticed when he walked in, had exposed it. Get her a chair, Victor said suddenly. Guess. Mei Lin blinked. Sir, sit, he said. Please. The word please startled the room more than the translation. As she sat, Victor turned to the experts. All of you missed the emotional syntax. You read power. She read pain. No one argued. Victor faced Mei Lin again. If I proceed with this acquisition without honoring the meaning you described, what happens? She hesitated, then answered honestly. You'll own the artifact, she said. But you'll violate the apology it carries. History will remember that. Victor exhaled slowly. For the first time in years, he felt small. Not because he had lost authority, but because he had never questioned it. You just changed everything, he said. Her hands trembled now. I didn't mean to. I know, Victor replied. That's why it matters. The door at the back of the room opened. An assistant whispered urgently in Victor's ear, investors demanding updates, media circling. Victor waved him off. He was still looking at Mei Lin. What's your name? He asked. Mei Lin. He repeated it once, as if anchoring it. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, not ominous, but distant. Inside, something irreversible had happened. The experts no longer sat above her. They sat beside her. And Victor Liang, the man who had never listened, realized the most dangerous thing of all. He wanted to hear more. That day, power shifted, not with shouting, not with money, but with a voice history had almost silenced. If this moment gave you chills, hit like and tell us in the comments, would you have spoken up like she did? Because what follows will test them both. The silence that followed Mei Lin's words did not mean peace. It meant aftermath. By the time the meeting dissolved, the experts avoided her eyes. Some nodded stiffly in respect. Others looked away, unsettled, not by her intelligence, but by what it exposed in them. Victor Liang walked out without another word. That hurt more than dismissal. Mei Lin returned to the dining floor, the clatter of cutlery grounding her. Guests laughed. Orders were called. Life moved forward as if nothing monumental had occurred. But inside her, everything felt unsteady. Had she crossed a line that could never be uncrossed? A supervisor pulled her aside. "You embarrass senior guests," he said quietly. "Do you know how dangerous that is?" "I was answering a question," Mei Lin replied. "That wasn't your question to answer." She nodded. She had no defense. Upstairs, Victor locked himself in his suite. The inscription still glowed on his tablet, the characters sharp, accusatory. He replayed the moment in his mind, the confidence in her voice, the room falling silent, the truth landing without cruelty. He should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt exposed. His phone buzzed nonstop. Investors, board members, advisors demanding reassurance that control hadn't slipped. One message stood out. "You let a waitress undermine 40 experts." Victor stared at it longer than the others. Because it wasn't wrong. The next morning, the hotel buzzed with rumor. A waitress spoke ancient Mandarin. She corrected the CO. She might get fired. Mei Lin felt eyes on her everywhere. Some curious. Some judgmental. None understanding. When Victor requested her presence again, her supervisor's face went pale. "Be careful," he warned. "Men like him don't like being humbled." They met in a smaller room this time. No experts. No audience. Just Victor and Mei Lin. "I don't like surprises," Victor said bluntly. "I didn't intend to surprise you," she replied. "Only to be accurate." He studied her carefully now, not as staff, but as a person. "Why hospitality?" he asked. "Because it pays the bills," she said. "And the rest of you?" She met his gaze. "I don't get paid for that." Victor exhaled. "You put me in an impossible position," he said. "If I follow your interpretation, I risk millions. If I ignore it, I betray the truth." Mei Lin's voice softened. "Truth doesn't demand obedience. Only honesty." That irritated him. "You make it sound simple." "It isn't," she said. "That's why people avoid it." The tension thickened. External pressure tightened like a vice. The board issued ultimatums. Media leaks hinted at internal conflict. Advisors warned Victor that public association with a staff anomaly could weaken investor confidence. Victor began to pull back. Meetings were postponed. Mei Lin's access restricted. When she passed him in the hallway one evening, he didn't acknowledge her. That hurt more than his anger. She considered quitting. Returning to silence would be easier. But her grandmother's voice returned again. "Once you speak, you don't get to pretend you never did." Victor, meanwhile, spiraled. He snapped at aides. Canceled dinners. Slept poorly. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard her words. Borrowed power. Unheard voices. Listening. He hated that they mattered. The breaking point came during a press briefing. A journalist asked, "Is it true your acquisition is based on a mistranslation?" Victor paused too long. That hesitation spoke louder than any denial. The room buzzed. That night, he sent for Mei Lin again. They met after hours in the empty conference hall. "You were right," Victor said abruptly. "And I don't know how to survive that." Mei Lin folded her hands. "Truth doesn't destroy. Fear does." He laughed bitterly. "Easy to say when you don't have billions at stake." She stood. "And easy to ignore when you do." Their eyes locked. For the first time, neither looked away. They had both spoken. Now they had to choose, retreat into silence, or face the cost of being heard. If this tension feels real, follow and subscribe, because what comes next will force them together in ways neither can escape. The decision came not from courage, but from necessity. Victor Liang's board issued a final directive. Either resolve the cultural dispute publicly within 48 hours or suspend the acquisition indefinitely. Investors were restless. Media scrutiny intensified. Silence was no longer an option. Victor had one choice left. He needed Mei Lin. They were sent together to Hangzhou, where the original manuscript had been preserved centuries earlier. The irony did not escape him. Power forced to travel with humility. On the flight, they sat in silence. Not hostile. Just guarded. Mei Lin watched the clouds drift beneath them, hands folded neatly in her lap. Victor studied spreadsheets he wasn't reading. "You don't have to pretend you're comfortable," she said quietly. He glanced at her. "I don't know how to be anything else." That honesty surprised them both. The archive was cold and reverent, stone walls holding centuries of breath. As they walked side by side through narrow corridors, the distance between them felt less about space and more about fear. "This place," Victor said softly, "was built before my family ever held wealth." Mei Lin nodded. "That's why it matters." They worked late into the night. Him asking questions, her translating context, meaning, emotional intent. Not just what the text said, but why it existed. At one point, Victor rubbed his temples. "I've spent my life proving I deserve to be heard," he admitted. "I never learned how to listen." Mei Lin didn't respond right away. "When you listen," she said eventually, "you don't disappear. You expand." Hours passed unnoticed. Coffee cups multiplied. Shoulders brushed accidentally, neither pulling away. The tension changed, not gone, but transformed. Less defensive. More human. That evening, rain fell softly outside the guest house. Victor stood by the window, watching droplets race down glass. "My father believed vulnerability was weakness," he said. "He lost everything once. I think I've been running from that moment ever since." Mei Lin sat across from him. "My grandmother believed silence was survival," she replied. "But she also taught me when silence becomes erasure." Their stories overlapped, not in detail but in shape. Plus, inheritance. The breakthrough came just before dawn. Mei Lin traced a final passage with her finger. This line was never meant to be displayed publicly. Victor leaned in. "Why?" "Because it wasn't for outsiders. It was a promise between generations." She translated it aloud. A vow of humility. A reminder that legacy without compassion collapses. Victor closed his eyes. "If I honor this," he said, "I risk everything." "And if you don't," Mei Lin said gently, "you become everything this text warned against." He looked at her, not as a waitress, not as an interpreter, but as someone who had seen him fully. "Will you stand with me?" he asked. Her breath caught. "Yes," she said. "But not behind you." He nodded. "Beside me." Morning light filtered through rain-washed windows. Something fragile had formed. Trust, not absolute, but growing. Respect, not demanded, but earned. And something unspoken lingered between them, neither willing to name it. As they prepared to leave, Victor's phone buzzed. His expression darkened. "What is it?" Mei Lin asked. "The board," he said quietly. "They're not coming to listen." She understood instantly. "They're coming to judge." Just as trust took root, power returned, and with it the risk that listening might cost everything. If this bond feels fragile to you, hit like and comment. Because the final act will test whether humility can survive power. The board arrived like a storm with polished shoes. They filled the hall in Hangzhou with certainty, their presence heavy with money, authority, and expectation. Cameras waited outside. Statements were prepared. Outcomes already assumed. Victor Liang stood at the front. Mei Lin stood beside him. Not behind. That alone unsettled them. "Let's begin," the chairman said briskly. "We are here to finalize the acquisition and restore confidence." Victor inhaled slowly. "The acquisition," he said, "will proceed if we honor the original intent of the manuscript." Murmurs erupted. One board member laughed sharply. "You're risking billions for a symbolic reinterpretation delivered by..." His eyes flicked to Mei Lin, "hospitality staff?" Victor felt the room turn toward her. Mei Lin felt the floor tilt. This was the moment she had feared. Victor hesitated. Just a fraction. And that was enough. "She is not on the board," the chairman snapped. And she will not speak. The words cut deeper than shouting ever could. Mei Lin stepped back. The silence from Victor was louder than any refusal. That was the betrayal. Not malice. Cowardice. Her chest tightened as she realized the truth. He was listening, until it cost him. The meeting ended in fracture. Victor walked out to applause from investors reassured by his restraint. Mei Lin walked out alone. By the time Victor reached the corridor, she was gone. That night, Victor sat awake, the ancient texts spread before him. Borrowed power, unheard voices. He had just proven the inscription right. For the first time, the weight of his success felt hollow. He had chosen safety over truth, and lost both. Mei Lin packed quietly. Her resignation letter lay folded on the desk. She had not been fired. She had been erased. Returning to invisibility felt worse than rejection. Her grandmother's words echoed once more. Silence is survival, until it becomes surrender. She left before sunrise. The press conference was scheduled for noon. Victor stood alone in his suite, tie undone, hands trembling. The board expected compliance. The media expected confidence. The text on his tablet glowed softly. He replayed her voice in his mind. You don't disappear when you listen. You expand. Victor closed his eyes. Then made the choice he had avoided his entire life. The press conference began on time. Victor stepped forward and abandoned the script. This acquisition, he said steadily, will not proceed as planned. Guess. He continued. Because legacy without humility is theft, and power without listening is fraud. The room erupted. He gestured to the screen behind him. The ancient Mandarin appeared, along with Mei Lin's translation. She was right, Victor said. And I was wrong. Reporters shouted questions. Where is she now? Victor swallowed. I hope she hears this. Mei Lin watched from a cafe across the city. Her hands shook. He was doing it. Listening out loud. Victor's voice did not waver. I step back from leadership effective immediately, he said. And I dedicate this project to honoring voices history taught us to ignore. Silence fell. Not forced. Earned. Hours later, Victor found her at the cafe. He didn't speak at first. Neither did she. I failed you, he said finally. Yes, Mei Lin replied. He nodded. And I won't ask forgiveness. She studied him. Then why are you here? Because listening doesn't end with applause, he said. It begins after. She breathed deeply. Slowly, the tension eased. Weeks later, the project relaunched, not as an acquisition, but a preservation initiative. Mei Lin was listed as lead cultural consultant. Victor sat in the audience. For once, he was not the center. And he had never felt more whole. When the unheard spoke, the mighty finally listened. Power didn't disappear, it transformed. If this story moved you, like, comment what part stayed with you, and subscribe. Because some voices change history, once we finally listen.